My favorite movies growing up were fairy tales. Like The Little Mermaid, I adored watching Ariel's story unfold. A beautiful princess of an underwater paradise, her curiosity pulling her to some unknown world above land. Or Cinderella, struggling, forgotten girl, being transformed into a beautiful young lady, trading in her rags for a big and bright ball gown. The handsome and charming prince picking her out of a crowd, desired by all. Chosen, pursued, and forever changed by someone else's hand. I absorbed all of the wonder and magic that comes with the Prince Charming story, and I carried it with me as I got older, unknowingly allowing it to inform my expectations about the world I was growing into. Fast forward to years later, I graduated with my master's in clinical psychology. I began seeing clients as an associate therapist, treating a range of diagnoses and issues. I later began incorporating these tools into other areas of work, like in the community wellness events I host and in the creative writing I do. In all of these roles, as I sat with people, I began to notice how often I'd see people who were emotionally paralyzed and stagnant. They'd often describe life as something that was happening to them rather than it being something for them to actively engage with. Even in terms of their connections, in their friendships, or in their romantic partnerships, in their work and family connections, a part of them felt obligated to wait for someone else to choose them, rather than for them to decide whether they actually like spending time with someone. Witnessing these stories over and over again not only felt deeply frustrating and moving for me, it felt familiar. I saw myself in these clients of mine, which is not too uncommon for us empathetic therapists, but I also realized I saw myself in Ariel and in Cinderella too. Throughout my formative years, I was placed in situations where my voice was stripped from me. As a result of erratic behavior around me or hearing commentary like, "Who's telling you to say that?" when I was stating opinions of my own, or hearing, "It wasn't that big of a deal," when stating my dislike and discomfort, I found safety in staying small. And so I learned that to have a voice was to have a weapon. Speaking up was harmful for everyone, including myself, and so I needed to give it away. Drowning in the confusion that a child has big feelings but is not allowed to share them, I traded my voice for a distant dream that I might be able to escape the world I was living in for a more emotionally safe one. In certain personal connections, I would often notice myself putting others' needs before my own, whether that be in small ways like what to eat for dinner tonight, or in much bigger ways like staying in places I was uncomfortable in for too long for fear of making people feel bad. A servant to what others expected of me, I sacrificed much of myself in hopes of keeping others happy. And so I learned that change does not come from me, it happens to me. And so the best way to not disappoint was to simply not try at all. Once again, trapped by the confusion that a young woman has needs of her own but must set them aside for the benefit of others, I traded my impact for a hope that I might finally be considered good enough in the eyes of the people around me. Convinced that my actions no longer had weight, I exchanged my sense of agency for a desperate wish that someone or something might come into the picture and change things around for me. My own sense of free will locked up tight in the attic, left stagnant. I suppose along the way, though I couldn't see it at the time, I desperately wished to feel heard, seen, and chosen. As I got older, I realized that accomplishing things felt pretty nice, and that I could be good at that. I won national championships as a starter for my soccer team. I received the opportunity to travel internationally and play professionally. I wrote my first independently published collection of poetry and prose. All of these accomplishments, like the ones I just named, were wonderfully positive things. Accomplishments I'm deeply proud of, privileges I'm keenly aware of, opportunities I'm deeply grateful for. I share these examples to show that in many areas of my life, I managed quite well, as did a lot of the people I've met with in my work. But emotionally, that inner stagnant princess remained. In fact, a lot of these princess-like qualities were encouraged in some ways by the greater world around me. Like Ariel, I could talk with people in personal settings and they could enjoy the conversation, when really I hadn't talked the entire time. My voice non-existent. It hadn't been a conversation, it had been more like a monologue. And so much like Ariel, I quickly learned that they dote and swoon and fawn on a lady who's withdrawn. That's a direct quote from the movie, by the way. Much like Cinderella, I was often praised for my agreeableness and niceness. And so much like Cinderella, I spent much of my time dreaming that things could be different without ever believing I could actually do something about it. Suppose along the way, though I couldn't see it at the time, I desperately wished to feel heard, seen, and chosen. I think a part of me really did hope that someone might slip a shoe on my delicate foot, see its perfect fit, and rescue me from the pain I was experiencing so that I might live the rest of my days in a castle in a faraway land. Experiencing the world felt less vibrant when I was voiceless and trapped by appeasement. Eventually, I began to question the narratives of those fairy tales I loved so much as a child. I would argue that it's not a coincidence that 90s children who grew up watching Ariel and Cinderella wait for someone to notice them and change their world forever now sit in therapist offices feeling lost, stuck, hopeless, and in more severe cases, traumatized. We grow up wanting to be like the pretty princesses we watched on screen. And what we saw was that pretty princesses are meant to be rescued by someone or something else outside of us. Now, of course, my purpose of being here today is not to simply place blame on Disney. Disney has continued to evolve their messaging in really positive ways. This messaging isn't unique to Disney. And really, any film can serve as the litmus test for where our culture's mindset is as a whole at that time. I'm here to highlight the through line between what we might unintentionally absorb from our culture, how that interacts with our individualized experiences, and where that leaves our sense of self, or lack thereof, today. As I sit with people, whether that be with clients in session, members of the community during wellness events, or elsewhere, and I observe the cultural conversations we're having in today's society, I see a divided world in more ways than one. Though this is not the truth, it feels as though there are only two ways to look at connection. Believing in the hyper-romanticized Romeo and Juliet-esque connection where we will simply die, or at least not be complete without another person. Or in the hyper-individualistic ideals that we can go at it alone, shown in the many songs and videos I continue to see boasting that we as women, quote, don't need a man. And not to mention, there is not one peer relationship shown in these movies. Their closest friends are birds, or fish, or mice. And while I adore animals and know them to be deep sources of support, I can't help but wonder what that says about the value of friendships and support in our lives. An independent woman is a beautiful thing to be celebrated, but independence in its truest form is not equivalent to isolation. We as a society, not just as women, need the confidence to take accountability in our lives, and we need trusted people to lean on in difficult times. No one is coming to save you. And I hope you grow to feel relieved by that statement. In fact, what I hope for you is that your Prince Charming never comes. Because if they do, if a person swoops into your life and promises to be your savior, it has all the markings of a fairy tale and none of real life. What I hope for you instead is that a person enters your life wanting to partner with you and simply promises to do the best they can with what they have. Nothing more, nothing less. And this isn't about the heteronormative romance that we often see in these fairy tales. It's about connection in all its forms. So whether that be a friend, family member, romantic partner, therapist, teacher, mentor, I hope someone shows up for you and helps you believe that getting to be a part of the real world is worth it, and is in fact even better than being part of any fairy tale. Despite what we may have seen growing up, love does not come in the form of a charming prince. Love doesn't involve rescuing, it involves bolstering. It's supportive, not redemptive. People who've walked through hardship don't need someone to redeem us or make us whole again. We need to learn how to recognize and revive that sense of self already inside of us. After much of my own personal work I've done internally, and through the help of supportive people in my life, I've looked back on my younger years with the realization that my power, my agency, was in some ways taken from me, and that will never be right or fair. But over the years, I've had opportunities to take it back and didn't, because I assumed it wasn't mine to have anymore. It was still up in the attic of the wicked stepmother's house, believed to be locked away, and my voice still handed over to the sea witch known as Ursula. Somewhere along the way, whether it be from the social and cultural messages we've absorbed, from our lived experiences, or a big mix of everything in between, we have gotten used to the power being in someone else's hands. But the truth is, the power was never supposed to be someone else's to take. In the same way that the power was never someone else's to take, the power to redeem ourselves was never someone else's to hold. Now, I want to be clear. This is not an ignore your feelings and pull yourself up from the bootstraps kind of message. In clinical psychology, remember, we love feelings. There are many harmful factors in people's lives that are still out of their control, and that is deeply frustrating. I'm not asking you to carry the burden of others' mistakes and solve them like they were your own. And this never means that those who've experienced assault, abuse, inequity, injustice, or any type of trauma are at fault or should have done more to get out of that situation. In our own ways, all of us have many things locked up in our metaphorical attics, some of which we don't have the ability to let go of right now. What I am asking you to consider is the weight of the lie you've been carrying that you do not have or deserve to have a say in your life. The lie that your voice is a weapon, or that sacrificing yourself for the benefit of others is honorable and desirable and the reason you exist. Consider just this today. It's possible that now, as an adult with strength and power and agency, you already have the ability to unlock this one. So for anyone feeling hopeless or helpless at the moment, I know it's been exhausting. I hope you can hear that we have the power to unlock that personal sense of agency in our lives, starting with understanding that we may have been taught to give it away at a young age, or that it was never even ours to have in the first place. I hope that moving forward, we listen well without giving up our voices completely. That we be kind without sacrificing the things we ourselves need. That we celebrate our independence without succumbing to isolation. No one is coming to save you. And I'd argue that's the most hopeful thing you'll hear all year. Because you are not Ariel or Cinderella or some other fairy tale princess. You aren't limited to a screen, a collection of pixels, or ink on the pages of a book. You are a whole person in this real, vibrant, challenging, beautiful, unpredictable world. With the power to, yes, be independent and make choices of your own, and then ask for help from loved ones when you need it. A person with the ability to make healthy, genuine connections with others around you. For me, that's happily ever after. Thank you.